Alright, hello my fellow readers, and welcome to today's video. We're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be ranking queer, book tropes, or, kind of what I would want in a queer book, and then we're going to be kind of just, looking at what would be my perfect queer book. Okay, I read a lot of queer books, but just, for the sake of it, we're going to have fun, and, yeah. Alright, going to be 62 comparisons, so let's get it started. All right, memoir versus historical fiction. Okay, both those are not my favorite. Let's be real. I'm very picky about the memoirs, but I do like a good queer memoir. And historical fiction is always sad. I think we're gonna go to historical fiction. Intersex story versus queer joy. Ooh, that is really hard because we don't have any intersex stories, so I would love to have more. But then in terms of queer joy, I love a good queer joy moment. So I think we're gonna go with that. Okay, fiction versus MLM. I mean, these are not really comparisons because they are so different. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with. I think we're gonna go with MLM. I don't know. I like both of them. Okay, graphic novel versus translated fiction. Translated fiction all the way. Dark romance versus young adult. Oh my gosh. Again, super different. I'm gonna say young adult only because dark romance I only like Rena Kent, and that's kind of it. Sci-fi versus queer pain. Well, I don't really like sci-fi in general, so that's not really a fair comparison because even though I queer pain, I don't necessarily, the thing is, I don't necessarily want to read about queer pain, and we're ranking it based on, what would be my perfect book, but in comparison, I'd rather have queer pain, I think. Hockey romance versus fantasy. I mean, that's an unfair comparison to fantasy because I'm going to choose a hockey romance all day long. Intersex story versus classic intersex story. Okay, historical fiction versus MMF or MMMF. It's going to be MMF or MMMF. There you go. Queer joy versus bisexual female main character. That's hard. I think I'm going to stick with queer joy, though, because I do think I'd rather have that. Intersex story versus bisexual FMC. Intersex story, because we don't see it. MLM versus single dad. I mean, they're both kind of implied. They're both the similar, just different type of it. I think I love a good single dad story. I think we're going to go single dad. Translated fiction versus sapphic. I think we're going to go sapphic. Young adult versus bisexual MMC. Bisexual MMC. Queer pain versus romance. Small town romance versus hockey romance. That's just unfair to small town romance. Fantasy versus small town romance. Small town romance. Intersex story versus trans story. Okay, neither of these do we see very often. So I think we're gonna go trans story. Queer joy versus versus a Why Choose. I love both of them. But I think I don't know. I think we're gonna go queer joy with that. Intersex story versus a Why Choose. I guess it's what I want, and I've read a lot of Why Chooses, so I think I'm gonna go with intersex story. Bisexual FMC versus Why Choose. Ooh. I think bisexual FMC. Sapphic versus single dad. I love a good single dad though. But I just want to go single dad because I do love good single dad. MLM versus Sapphic. Okay, these are a hard choice because I like both of them. I don't read as much Sapphic as I do MLM though because I feel like Sapphic is harder to come by for some weird reason. So we're going to say Sapphic for this. Translated fiction versus MLM. MLM. Fiction versus translated fiction. Fiction. They're both kind of similar. Romance versus bisexual MMC. Oh, that's so hard. Because I like both of them. I think we're gonna go with romance. Queer pain, bisexual MNC. Young adult versus queer pain. Oh, that's hard because I think young adult can get a little coming out for me, but then so is queer pain. So they're kind of similar. I think we're gonna go with young adult. Queer pain versus dark romance. Queer pain. Oh. Sci-fi versus dark romance. Well, neither of these are like my jam. In terms of what I read more, I read dark romance a little more, so we're gonna say that. Because I'd be more interested in that. Trans story versus hockey romance. Can we maybe have a trans hockey romance? We have the prospect, so we have a baseball version of that. I feel like we could have both of them, guys. Anyway, hockey romance, I think. Small town romance, okay, trans story. Intersex story versus small town. Intersex story. Classics versus small town romance. Fantasy versus classics. Fantasy. Single dad versus queer joy. Now that's just impossible to choose. I think we're gonna go with queer joy though. Single dad versus intersex story. Bisexual FMC versus single dad. Well, those are hard. I think the bisexual character has to be done well. But I don't. The thing about single dad is it gets a little like coming outy for me, and I don't always love that in a book. So I think we're gonna say bisexual FMC. Ooh, why choose? I think. Okay, single dad. Sapphic. MLM. Fiction. That's hard. I think they both have their merit. I would say translated fiction is always, I would say historical fiction for that because I do think they're different. Okay, memoir versus translated fiction. Again, that's really hard because I think they both have their merits. But I would say I'm probably not going to read a memoir as much as I'm going to read a fiction. So I'm going to say translated fiction. Okay, out of these, I would pick a memoir. Hockey romance, romance. That's hard. I think a hockey romance just has a slight edge over romance because I love hockey. Okay, trans story versus romance. I think a trans story if it's done well and it's not just like intersex story versus romance. I'm gonna say romance. Ooh, intersex story. Bisexual MMC. I guess these are such different vibes too because like young adult is like not. I don't know. Like they're just very different vibes here, so it's hard to choose because I think they both have their merit. But in terms of like what I would like, I think read more at this stage of my life is going to be small town romance. Okay, fantasy versus young adult. I think fantasy. Young adult. Oh, well, classics are almost always queer pain for the most part. So we're going to say I'd rather read just like straight up queer pain. Dark romance. I'd rather read a classic, I think. I don't love sci-fi. Hockey romance versus queer joy. I read a lot of hockey romance, so maybe I'm going with queer joy because I do think I read a lot of it. Intersex story versus hockey romance. Yeah, I just think I want an intersex story. Hockey romance. Trans story. I don't know, romance, I think. Ooh, those are tough choices. I think I'm gonna go with intersex story. I think it's just because I don't see it very often. Oh, now we have the bisexuals paired up against each other. Which one do I choose? The female like me, or do I choose the man? There's just something about a bisexual man, though. There's something about it that will get me every single time. So I think bisexual MNC. Okay, bisexual FMC. Why choose? Ooh, single dad. Something about a single dad. Sapphic. I think MLM. Single, like small town romance can get a little old for me because I don't read a ton of them. Fiction. Small town romance. Ooh, fantasy versus historical fiction. They are definitely not things that I read very often. I say historical fiction in queer literature is always very sad. It's always very depressing. So it's always like, would I want to read that electively? No. So I think I'm going to say fantasy. Historical fiction, I think, out of those two. Young adult translated fiction. I mean, that's hard because I do love a good memoir, but it has to be, like I said, it has to be very specific. So I think we're gonna go young adult. Well, memoirs are almost always actually no, because I read inspiration porn and that was not like sad. So I think I'm saying memoir for that. Um, Graphic novel. All right, so now we have everything ranked. Now let's go through it. Let's go top to bottom. So at number 24 is sci-fi. I kind of figured that because I don't read a ton of sci-fi in general, so I don't really want that in my queer story because yeah. I should have also put like dystopia in here because that would have made a little more sense, but it's fine. Then we have classics again, kind of common because I don't read a ton of classics in general. So yeah, dark romance. I thought it would be a little bit higher, but I really only read dark romance when it comes to like Raina Kent. So I think that's probably why it's just so low. And then we have queer pain. That doesn't surprise me. I would much rather read a happy story than a sad story. There is obviously a time and place for reading queer pain, especially when it comes to history, like historical queer literature and stuff. But for the most part, I'm not gonna like want to read that. Like, I'm not gonna, I guess I wouldn't like, it's not that I wouldn't choose it, because of course I would, but I think it's just like, would I like go out of my way to like go buy the book immediately? No. So there you go. Graphic novel, that makes sense. The only graphic novel I've ever read is Heartstopper, so that's not really a fair one. Memoir, again, like, I wouldn't go out of my way to read a memoir at all, but they are good when I get them. So would I like say it's my perfect queer book? No. Young adult, again, I think that's just where I'm at in my life. I'm not as into young adult books as I used to be. Translated fiction, again, kind of figured that. I'm actually surprised it's lower than historical fiction though, because I would think they would be flipped. I read a lot more translated fiction when it comes to queerness than I do historical fiction, only because historical fiction can just really rely on the 80s and the AIDS crisis, and not just, I need something different. But yeah, so there's translated fiction and historical fiction. Then we have fantasy. That doesn't really surprise me. I don't read a ton of fantasy, so I probably wouldn't like I wouldn't say it's like my perfect book at all. Okay, small town romance, not really shocking. It's kind of in the middle-ish. In that like middle little quad there. But yeah, I'm not surprised. And then we have fiction. Yeah, I definitely still I thought that would be a little higher because I do tend to read fiction. I read about romance and fiction almost kind of neck and neck, but sometimes like there are some months where fiction ranks a little higher, sometimes romance ranks a little higher. It really just depends. Currently this month it's romance is a little bit heavier, but that's okay. Okay. Then we have MLM. Again, that doesn't really surprise me at all, just because I do read a lot of MLM books, but I do like a good sapphic book when they come out. So there's not many of them. I feel like no one really writes them, and there's certain authors I just don't really buy because I don't like that they tell stories in third person, so I don't tend to read those. But yeah. And then we have sapphic. So we have MLM and then sapphic. Again, similar thing. Then we have single dad, which, yeah, I could see it being 10. I do like a good single dad story, but there are other things I like more. So then we have Why Choose. Makes sense why it ranks in the top 10. I love a good Why Choose. As long as it's MMF or MMMF. I don't like, yeah. Yeah. And then we have the bisexual FMC, bisexual MMC. They're pretty neck and neck. I think for me, it's just depending on what I'm reading more of. So 7 and 8, I feel like they could have been interchanged as well, and it would have made sense. So instead, because there's 2 intersex stories here, we're gonna go to romance. We'll we'll stop the number 6. We're just gonna go to the 5. So that's romance. That makes sense. I do like a good romance. And we have a trans story, again similar, I think, to what number 2 is, which is an intersex story. I just want something different. I want something unique. I want something that's going to tell a story differently. And then we have a hockey romance, and then we have an intersex story, and then we have queer joy. All of these things make a lot of sense to me because I do want something very different. I read a ton, and I read a ton of queer literature, that I want something that is different. I know that we obviously have The Prospect, which is a baseball, like, romance that has a trans character in it. I would love to have a hockey version of that. Look, let's just give it to us, okay? Intersex stories are just really hard to come by in general. I've only ever seen like 2 fictional ones. So if you have any more, let me know because I would love to read more because I think hearing that perspective is so different, especially with what happens to them as kids and all of that. Like the medical decisions that are made for them before they even understand what's going on is insane. So for me, that I always like to read that. And then we have Queer Joy, which of course is going to rank number 1. Of course, I mean, of course, guys. Um, I can't not have Queer Joy be at the top. I feel like I would much rather read a happy queer story than a sad queer story. So, of course, it's number top. It's like number 1, of course. I thought this was a little bit of a different take on a video, and I think it's really fun. It's really interesting to me, to kind of see these ranked. I mean, none of these surprise me, and all of which, like, I would love to see, like, an intersex story set in, like, a hockey kind of book or a trans story set in a hockey book. Because I do think that'd be really fun, bringing worlds together. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little different, but I don't know. It was kind of fun and kind of different. So I'm glad I got to do this with you guys. Anyway, let me know what you would like in a queer story and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Love you guys. Bye!